Hey there, listeners. Well, I had an interview with a lady called Latonya Roberts. And Latonya actually transforms organizations into high-performing businesses. She plays a couple roles, and she actually is a fractional COO, so in other words, a chief operating officer, but a fractional meaning she's only in there for a few hours, couple of days a week in an organization. And she's also an HR consultant. But I don't know about you, but I find that it actually is interesting to see how leaders actually show up every single day. And we talked about that. We talk about how do you show up? Do you show up in the way you are and who you are? And we also talked about unlocking the next level. What an awesome conversation. But the other thing we talked about was leaders leave their ego at the door. And actually is very interesting. So next time you're looking at yourself or others in the workplace, watch how they show up every single day. All right, listeners, it's time for you to get into this episode and enjoy the interview.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Great to have you here with us today. I've got an awesome guest with me. Her name is Latonya Roberts. Latonya, a massive welcome to you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I am right outside Atlanta, Georgia.
And have you always been in Atlanta?
No, actually, I lived in right outside of Washington, D.C. for several years and moved down here in 2020.
When you say outside of Washington, D.C., where would that have been?
Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay, so that wouldn't have been Herndon around that way.
About 20, 30 minutes from Herndon.
Okay. Yeah, I've been there. Great place. Yeah, very good. Hey, look, you're known as the Fractional COO and also the Human Capital Strategist. And you have an organization called Harmony Consulting Group. I've given the listeners a little bit of an introduction to you, but we'd love to hear from you more as well. But tell us more about you and your background.
So I started out in consulting for some of the big companies like Booz, Hamilton, and Deloitte nearly 20 years ago, where I was doing strategy, change management, process improvement work, and a lot of IT adoption projects. So helping organizations just really do major transformations. And I noticed that the people were being left out of the conversation or brought in too late. And so I switched focus to really just focus on the people side of the house, where I made sure that they were set up for success, meaning they were communicated to, understood how their roles were changing, had the training that they needed. And eventually I also got into some executive coaching and doing a lot of the human capital strategy work. Fast forward to just before the pandemic, I decided I'm ready to go out on my own, and I partnered with a couple other people to bring our services to market and moved my family down to Atlanta, where I was able to walk away from my job a year later. And then I became the COO of that company. And so I've been doing that for about the last 5 years. And now I provide fractional COO and human capital services for service providers.
The word fractional, it seems to be being used quite a bit of late, whether it be a marketing term, that's another buzzword, but I think it's more than that. Fractional for you, what does that mean?
So for me, that means I'm still a part of the leadership team of an organization. So I have management responsibility, have a budget, anything that your COO would do. I just work more so on a part-time basis so I can service more clients. I bring my different expertise and experiences to companies. And the benefit to them is that they get that experience and they get the services they need, but at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah. In other words, I don't want to hire a full-time CEO, but if I can bring in you for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week, then I can have your services and your expertise come in for the fraction of the cost, as you say, which is really good. You also said earlier on about previous roles and that you were going into organizations, helping them with transformation and setting them up for success. What has been one or two sort of things that sort of make transformations fail? Where do people struggle with that kind of transformation?
They struggle with lack of clarity in what the transformation is or why the transformation is happening. keeping people up to date throughout the process, even though you may not have an update. The update can literally be, we don't have an update. We're continuing to work on whatever the kinks are. I always tell people to make sure you still communicate that, because once you put a timeline out there, people are always wanting to know what is happening.
Hmm.
And then the other thing I would say is documenting processes along the way. A lot of times when I've gone in to do a transformation, people don't have their original process documented. So we would have to come in and interview them to figure out, well, how are you doing your work? And then go back and assess, well, where can we do this more efficiently and how do we move it to whatever the new change is that is occurring?
Do you find that people do like a debrief at the end, look at those things around processes and what went well, what didn't go well? Do they do that, or they just go, oh, well, we're on to the next thing now?
No, absolutely. We do a debrief after everything. And even as we're going through the process, so typically we're are breaking it out into different phases of the transformation. And we want to understand what are those things that we need to change along the way, or what is working so that we can continue doing that, and what we need to stop doing. So I recommend regular debriefs, especially if you are doing more of an agile type project and you're using that methodology. You're doing a debrief every couple of weeks with each sprint instead of waiting all the way until the end.
Yeah. And it allows you the ability then to adapt and move along different things, and which is good.
Right.
See, you said earlier on about clarity. I think that's what I also see as well as one big thing is that there's not enough clarity, or the leadership team may have clarity, but are they actually sharing it with everyone else? And sometimes there's a disconnect there. What do you find?
I find a lot of that if they have clarity, right? That's a huge if, because a lot of times the leadership team doesn't have clarity, or they're not all bought into the transformation, right? So we have to get them on the same page first, and then remind them that just because you have clarity, your team also needs to be communicated with along the way in regular intervals. They should be expecting that. And it's not always that they have to have the conversation, but even just having a simple website that is dedicated to the project, where you have the announcements up there and you have the dashboards and different ways to share information. And of course, sending out your emails or some type of visual is somewhere around the office or online where people can go in and just check on progress.
Nice. Latonya, you said before that you walked away from your job and started your own business with some others. What was
Mhm.
that stepping across the line, or just crossing over in the sense of going from a corporate role maybe to do your own business? What was it like for you? How did it feel?
Scary at first, to be honest, but also it was freedom. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the freedom to be able to work on the projects that I like to work on, do the work that I like to do, and really have a bit more control over my life. And I did it in a planned out way. I come from strategy work, right? So I had a plan. I didn't just wake up one day and say, I quit. I had a plan where I was able to replace my income, make sure that I had money saved up, and make sure that all of my needs were met, because I do believe when your money is funny, so are your decisions, right? So I wanted to take away that burden of making decisions based on the financial resources that I had, that would allow me to be creative and still continue to do the work that I love to do.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you get the money thing out of the way, it helps you with the decisions, but it also helps you with that creativity side of things. However, I do think that you just need to keep going and sometimes bite the bullet. Interesting how you said it was sort of that sort of like scary, but also on the other side, you had that freedom, which is something that's
Mhm.
really good. And I think there's a whole lot of leaders who are probably listening to this podcast right now, but there's a whole lot of leaders who aren't as well, who wanted to go and do something else, but they're not. They've got that fear barrier in the way. And then I think the other thing for them is they are, some of them, I think, are too comfortable in their role,
Yeah.
right? So every week or fortnight, every 2 weeks or every month, boop, and goes that money into the account. And I don't know about you, but when I first left, in that first month, the money didn't go into the account. I was like, whoa,
Mhm.
it's no longer there. It's just because it was coming in every month. And wow, what a different playing field or playground or game that we're playing. Totally different.
Yes, it is.
Mm.
It is. But I think you mentioned some people do need to bite the bullet, right? I, you have to know yourself. Some people, they need that extra pressure or extra dopamine to just say, I have no other choice, and that works for them. I'm not that person. I like the stability I like stability, so I needed the cushion there. So that's what worked for me.
Yeah, cool. So
Mhm.
whatever it is, and I think what you said as well is that you planned it, right? So you got together the money and so forth. So it's planned. So it's risk taking, but it's calculated risk taking, which is a different thing totally, which is all good. Very good.
Yeah.
Now, leadership. How did you actually get into leadership?
I don't know the exact way, but I think it was just I saw a need on a project and I stepped into the role of helping to make decisions, helping train other people along the way. And eventually I became the project manager of teams or the team lead of teams, even when I worked with others that were more experienced. I remember being on one project servicing a government agency, and I was the youngest team member. But they noticed how organized I was and how I made sure that everyone knew their job and the roles are very clear and we had a schedule. And I became the project manager for that role. So I think it was just something that it was naturally in me to step up and lead. Maybe it's that I'm a first child, so I'm used to managing the chaos around the house. So I just fell into that role, and I like making sure that people are taken care of. One of my love languages is acts of service, and I think an act of service is making sure that people can thrive and have what they need, and so that's what I did with my teams.
Interesting how the first children of a family of kids or siblings and that always think that they are the leader. I'm first child as well. And I feel like we're on the cutting edge. We have to go down that road first, right? And so,
Yeah.
and the others follow, but the other siblings are probably listening right now going, no, no, it's not. But anyhow, it's all good. We think it's so. And I actually think that's where leadership came from too. Hey, this person could be liable from history. What I'm quite interested to know is because I think sometimes we are formed, or you and I are where we are today in life based on the leaders that we've come across in our past, our pathway. And I think the thing
Mhm.
here is that they help shape us. So, who's been your favorite leader and why?
I would say Michelle Obama. I love her authenticity, her relatability, her realness. I mean, reading her books, she just says, you know what? Hey, me and Barack, it wasn't always great. When these kids were little, I hated him for a little bit of time, right? And just showing up and just saying, look, everything isn't sunshine and roses. We have challenges, but it's how you recover. And I think that her grace and how she's dealt with adversity and still being true to her values is something to be admired. And you just can't help but love Michelle Obama. So I really appreciated that, just showing up as authentically herself, even realizing that, hey, when they first went into the White House, she couldn't be her authentic self because she was under a spotlight. And now that they've left, she's just really been able to grow and shine. And I think at this stage in my professional career, authenticity is so important. When you first start out, you do exactly what she did, right? You try to blend in, you try to be what others expect of you, right? And it puts you in a cage and people around you don't get the best of yourself. And then eventually you say, you know what? I don't need this. I can be me. And again, it goes back to that freedom and that creativity. When you can show up as who you are, you can tap into different talents, you can tap into different thought processes, and you just unlock the next level for you and for others that you are engaging with.
I love what you just said there about unlocking the next level for you. Because I think
Mhm.
if you can be showing up who you are, because I don't know about you, but I find a lot of people are that's either hiding behind that title that they've got, or they're turning up and they're being something that they're not. They're not
Yeah.
congruent with who they are, and it shows. And people see it. They may not see it themselves, but they're trying to do something else. And I think that unlocking that next level is really, really important. Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
Listeners, what are you doing today to unlock unlock the next level of potential? What are you doing? Something for you to think about as you are listening to this episode. Now, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title or that statement, what does it mean for
Mhm.
you?
For me, that means leadership is changing in the sense that before leaders could be set on this pedestal and it was a one way thing, more of a looking at your team as what can you do for me? Now it's more the expectation. It's a mutually beneficial situation. It has been for a while, but I think people are really starting to embrace that as people start to leave the organization and leaders become younger and younger, where their expectation is that leaders are vulnerable. Leaders are more involved in the shaping and the growth of their team members. They are creating a psychologically safe space for people to show up, be their authentic self, bring in new ideas, challenge the status quo. And it is the expectation that leaders do this, right? You embrace a place that values inclusivity and belonging and diversity. You're removing barriers that prevent you from thriving. And if you don't, team members are not afraid to say, this doesn't work for me and I'm going to leave.
And they do. They vote with their feet, right? So they leave.
They vote with their feet. They vote with their feet and they vote with their actions, right? So quiet quitting is a thing. People will stay in a role until the next role comes along, but while they're in that role, they're not as productive. You're not getting the best. They're just coming in and maintaining and just let me just do the job. Let me do just enough to stay under the radar until that next thing comes along.
So here they are. I love what you just said there in the sense that the quiet quitting, and I don't like the quiet quitting because I don't want people to do quiet quitting. I think it's important for people to keep going and doing what they're doing. But when people quiet quit, in other words, the way I would say it is they start to withdraw. They start to do certain things, and that what's really quite important, I think, here is that they've got to keep doing their job because that's what they're being paid for. But if they're not doing that job, it's really it's an interesting balance, eh? So it's like, well, if you're not doing the job and you're quiet quitting, but I'm paying for you, so what's going on? And I get it. So I'm like, if you're wanting to leave, leave. Just go do what you need to go and do if you're not happy. Because also, if you're not happy, then it's going to be showing in your work, your performance. It's going to affect the customers. It's going to affect other team members as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I get it. But there's the other side too, right? So yeah, how quickly do you leave? That's the key.
Right. How quickly do you leave? And then as a leader, if you notice that this is happening in your organization, do you make a change? Whether that's changing your actions and how you show up as a leader, or is it change releasing that person
Yeah.
to go on to something else that better serves them? Right. So either way, that is a sign that something needs to change, but you have to be able to recognize that, right?
Too right.
Some people don't recognize, they don't see their team members, so they don't know that there has been a change until it's too late.
I agree. And I think that sometimes it is too late, right? So, but I think, if the leader is looking at and see what's going on, definitely, and releasing them to go off and do something else. It's not what we're saying here, listeners. It's not we're going to chuck them out. It's more about sometimes there are people that come to an organization or they're in a role and it's just not happening for them. Their values, the organization's values aren't just aligned, or there's personality clashes, or there's all sorts of things happening. So I think the big thing here would be for how do we get people to move on and do things, but in a way, because I've seen people go to other roles and they just take off. They just do really, really well and excel, right? So that's really important for them to do that too.
Absolutely right. The role may not be for them. They may thrive better in another part of the organization. And when I say making the choice to release them, it doesn't mean that they have to be released from the organization. You have a conversation first. Hey, what's going on here? What can we be doing differently? Is there another role that you're a better fit for? Is there something you would like to be doing that you're not doing? Can we come to a solution that is mutually beneficial? Because there are other options. It's not always just leave the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. The other times I've seen also that they're working for one leader and they're struggling, and then we put them with another leader, another role that suits them. And then once again, they excel in that role. So they're not leaving the organization, but there's something happening there for them too.
Right.
Very good. The world seems to be getting faster, fast-paced, ever-changing world. There's a lot happening, disruptions and so forth. For a leader to be successful in today's world, what do you think they might need to have in place? What do they might need to think about? What might they need to do to be successful?
Yeah, I would have your systems, your structure in place. And so that encompasses a lot of things. It's the regular check-ins with your team member. It's making sure that you're getting your communications out. Do you have your processes in place? Do you have your performance indicators in place? How do you know when something is working or it's not working? Else, your training in place as well, right? Just it's from A to Z. It's the constant communication, the structure, whether you're working on an IT system or you're just managing a team. those things still remain the same, right? Communicate, document, look at the performance indicators, adjust where necessary, and train for success.
Hmm. Train who for success?
All of your team members and yourself too, right? You need to stay up to date on your training.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of leaders that are not. And so there's a terminology or a sort of statement I use here, Latonya, where I say, if you're not changing quick enough, then you run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind.
Yes.
And I think the big thing here would be for people to do the training to stay ahead of the curve, to help them understand things as well. AI is a big example, right? We're hearing that buzzword out there, AI, all those letters. People like freaking out about it, others embracing it. So it's about embracing it. Do you have to be an expert in it? No. But do you need to have an awareness around it and then how it might actually help you? And those systems and processes you're being talked about, they can actually help you pull some of that together, maybe even help you with some of that data that's coming out of that kind of information as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I love AI. So I've been obsessed with it for quite a while now. And so I work with my clients on integrating AI into their business processes and showing them that one, it's not as scary and you can embrace it by recognizing that the workforce of today and the future includes AI employees, right? So how do you train and develop these AI employees to take on some of those repetitive tasks, help out with some of that analysis, get more efficient, and then that frees up the time of your human employees to do some of that work that only a person can do, right? So part of the customer service, you're still going to have clients that only want to speak to a person. They don't want to speak to a chatbot. They don't want to deal with the AI piece, right? You still need people for that. And they're the strategic thinking. AI is only going to get you so far. Right. So, what do you do with that information? If you're developing content or you're writing something, you still need that human element, the stories, the case studies, etc. Those all go in there as well. So, I say embrace it, learn it, just get comfortable with it. How do you do a simple prompt? If you really want to get fancy, how do you make your own GPTs that would you can just send someone a link and say, put the data in here. The GPT is going to ask you the right questions to fill it out so that we can get consistent results.
I laugh when people are talking about AI because it is scary for some people, but I laugh because I think about all the things that have happened in our lives over the last few years and all the change we've gone through. I remember the days where we went from cassette tapes to this thing called a CD, and everyone's like, "Oh, I don't know about that CD thing." And then we went to DVD, and what's this? And and then I see other things being done in life, and I think, wow, they've done it. It used to take 2 hours, but now it gets done in 30 minutes or 20 minutes. And you think like, wow. And it's just be done more effectively, but it's people being open to that discomfort of that change, but also being open to new things as well. And so, yeah, it's easy for us, for you and I and others to say, let's embrace it. But it's not always easy to do, but just stick with it, listeners. If you can go and do it, I think it's a really good thing to help you be successful in today's world.
Yes, it is.
Mm. Now, you and I have been talking about things from a lens of a leadership or a leader. If we were to change lens right now and think about it from an employee's perspective, because you're the human capital strategist and you're working with humans and people,
Mhm.
employees' expectations of leaders, have they changed?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that employees are realizing that they had agency, they have a voice in it, and they can set boundaries, right? And they are learning to advocate for themselves more and say what they need. They're asking for help. They're saying, I want to be a part of the conversation. I want to help with the decision making. I have new ideas. And while everything isn't perfect, I think that there is a lot of good that comes out of people just sharing their voice in the workplace.
Yeah, too right. Yeah. And it's actually that voice being heard, eh? Mm. So it's
Yeah, yeah, you have to hear them. When once you move up that ladder, you're so far removed from the actual work. You may be removed from the client or the customer. So you're not hearing what the challenges are. You're not out there in the field and doing the day-to-day work. And so your decisions are based on the information that you have available. And if you don't have that certain information available, you're not making a truly informed decision. So you need to be able to go to your team members, the employees, to say, okay, this is what I think should happen, but what is really going on when you talk to X employee? Is the decision that I'm making, is it the right decision based on what you're actually dealing with? And it's not to say that they are the final decision maker, but it is to say, I want to hear from you, and then I'll go from there.
What we find is the same analogy you just talked about is around sports. And if we think about rugby in this part of the world, even if you think about soccer or football, depending which how you actually call it in different countries, what we find is comes back to if a country isn't doing well in its sport, and they go back, they will look at the national body of that sport, and they sometimes are what I call them in the Eiffel Tower, and like
Mhm.
you said, they're not actually understanding what's happening in the ground. And on what I think is that it's the grassroots. We've got to go back to those grassroots and help develop the grassroots, the future. So today, for an organization to be successful in 5, 10, 15 years from now in a sport, go into where the kids are or go into local sports clubs and things like that. And that's the grassroots, help develop
Mhm.
that. That's when you start to develop those leaders in the sporting field for the future as well. And I think it's very similar for a company, for a business as well, is that we need to make sure we are listening to the grassroots, listening to what's actually happening, but also getting in there and helping develop them rather than just choosing somebody because we're having to fill a role and good luck. You're now the leader and all the very best.
Yeah, absolutely. Hearing the people and then also recognizing that this person may be a great subject matter expert, but they are not a great leader.
Yep.
Right? And that's okay in some cases, but you have to have a career path for them to go in, right? Because you still need those SMEs, but you definitely need people to stand up and be great leaders in your organization. So train them, uplift them, and make sure that they are put in a position to be successful.
Yeah. So as you said earlier on, train them for success. And I think the big thing here is that wake up, senior leaders, look at the legacy, look at the organization. Who is there in the organization that you should start developing for today for the future? Yeah, that's what a smart leader would do.
And communicate that person is being groomed
Yeah.
for that role, right? Because a lot of times I've seen people where they identify that future leader, but they never told that person. And then that person is looking like, well, I don't know if I'm going to move up in this organization. I don't know what the future looks like for me. So then they start seeking that elsewhere. So communicate to that person. This is what I think. Is this something that you want to? And let's put together a plan together.
Spot on. Spot on. Yeah, because you're right. If they don't communicate, that doesn't mean that they're guaranteed that they'll get the role. That's one thing.
Right.
But the thing is,
They still have to earn it.
yeah, they still have to earn it. You're right. And then on the other side is let's develop them and let's talk to them about, hey, first of all, where do you want to go in your career? And two, well, how can we actually make that happen and help develop it? I remember in Hewlett Packard several years ago, I was over there. We had a brand new senior vice president for talent and leadership development, and he wanted to have half an hour with me. So I said, okay, cool. I'm in Palo Alto in San Francisco. Let's catch up. So we did. And he actually asked me the question. He says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you want to go with your career? So I actually said to him, I don't actually want to be working here anymore. I want to actually be doing what I'm doing here, but in my own brand, helping many companies, right? And impacting thousands and millions of leaders, not just the group of leaders we've got here. And he's like, that's fantastic. I was pretty vulnerable in actually saying that to him because I'm thinking, am I actually saying, and they're going to get rid of me? And his
Mhm.
answer was, this is awesome. So now what we need to do is help you make that happen. And I'm like,
I like that.
what? Really? And he goes, well, you think about where you're sitting right now. You're in the buildings of Hewlett Packard. And
Mhm.
Dave and Bill, they were entrepreneurs. And they started in a garage that you've been to, Dennis, several times. One. Two is you think about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and when they started Apple. Where did they start their careers? Hewlett Packard. So you'll see that a whole lot of people around this whole area have all started their careers in this organization to go off and do their own businesses. And so that's the kind of culture we have to try wanting to help people, but we're going to help train you for success using your words, Latonya.
Mm. That's good, that's good, and then a lot of people don't have that experience, so I'm glad it worked out for you.
Yeah, it did. It did. He resigned and left, and but it,
Oh, no.
yeah, that was all good. But it did work out because with my leader and his leader, and they knew also too because I had shared that with them. So it was very, very good.
Mhm,
Now, if I could get you to get your crystal ball out now and think about the future, where do you see
mhm.
leadership being in 5 years?
I would love to see leaders embrace really looking at creating a culture of inclusivity, culture where people can truly shine and thrive in the organization and barriers are removed. People feel seen, heard, and valued in the organization. And egos are left at the door. Right? And not thinking that just because you have this title that you have the final say and no there isn't a intimidation factor or you think that your way is the only way. I would love to see that removed from leadership and just truly embrace the talent and the people that you have working with you, not necessarily for you, but with you because it is a team sport.
Hmm. I seriously love what you just said there about leaving the egos at the door. So important for people to do that. Yeah. Latonya, it's been great talking to you today. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
You can go to my website. It is harmonyconsultinggroup.org. So ORG, harmonyconsultinggroup.org. Or you can find me on LinkedIn at Tonya Roberts.
Excellent. Well, once again, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today, and keep up the great work that you're doing. But thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, there you go, listeners. What a wonderful interview here. Do you have clarity around where you and your organization is going? Here's actually a really good question. Do you have freedom in your role and in your life? And then the other thing too is that we should be thinking about how do we train ourselves, but also our teams for success. Remember, leave the ego at the door. Hey, it's always great being with you. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.